pretty soon after the last one. It looks like the debate analysis has been getting some traction, so I appreciate all you guys following along, and wanted to release another video because there's big news, it looks like, in the vice presidential sweepstakes to see who will be Donald Trump's nominee. It appears that Melania Trump is actually in favor of Tucker Carlson, so he is certainly now added to the list of serious vice presidential contenders. So I thought that was a bit of a shock, but she feels that he could intelligently and effectively carry his message, and they sort of stand for similar things. And of course, Trump values loyalty above all else. All this information is gleaned from an Axios report, but Axios, at least with the insider knowledge and insider gossip, has usually been pretty accurate because they have people that are very connected with the inner workings of the Trump administration. So most of the time I trust them, although you should always look askance at mainstream media, although they're a little more independent than some of the big ones. So I tend to trust them. So that was their report, and they gave a report about who the other potential vice presidential candidates were. In terms of Tucker Carlson, it would be an interesting choice. Of course, many assume that Trump would either choose a minority or a woman as his vice presidential running mate. So a bit of a surprise that Tucker Carlson would be chosen. But Carlson, I don't think would be a great choice, nor would he be a horrible choice. I think Carlson personally would be kind of a wash, only because he does cement the libertarian base of the party that I think really did help Trump get elected last time around. And people have this perception that Tucker is very conservative and very hard right, which isn't necessarily the case. So on criminal justice reform, for example, when the Eric Garner situation happened, when a black man was killed by the police for selling loose cigarettes, Tucker Carlson was in favor of charging the police officer and said that there should be some meaningful criminal justice reform. So on some criminal justice reform issues, Carlson has actually been more progressive. The alarming aspect about him is that he has openly supported the Great Replacement theory. And he's openly said that the European culture will be replaced by immigrants or by minorities, which I don't think is a message that sells very effectively, especially if you have a growing number of Hispanics looking to actually support the GOP, and you have a growing number of black people looking to support the Republican Party. If they chose Tucker Carlson, I think he'd lose a lot of that support. And it's very ironic that the anti-immigration approach, the sealed borders that GOP supports, but when they advocate for pro-life issues, when they advocate for more conservatism on LGBT issues, when they advocate for people simply having more kids, I hate to say it, but middle class and upper class white people, as well as Hispanic and black people, those who tend to have more education, for better or for worse, are choosing not to have kids, or choosing to have kids at the age of 40 or 35, and choosing to simply have one kid instead of having 3 or 4 or 5. If you want that ethos of conservatism, of high religiosity, of high Christianity, you think you want a lot of people coming from Latin American countries. Now, of course, they'll be modernized too in 20 years and then not want to have kids. I'm sorry, that's just the way the modern world is going, again, for better or for worse. But it is ironic that the GOP is so oppositional to these people coming in, when the people coming in are the last vestige of people that actually support a lot of their social values. So the irony is very deep. And I think Tucker is a very good communicator. I think he's very smart. I think he comes off, aside from the Great Replacement stuff, as usually quite level-headed. And he can explain himself very effectively, where he sounds reasonable even when he's talking about something that's not very reasonable. So I think he'd be a wash. I think there'd be a lot of negatives as well. But in a vice presidential debate, God, he would be spectacular against Harris. That would be fun to see, Tucker versus Harris. I think because Melania is supporting him and she has Trump's ear in some regard, although it seems like she'll be less of a part of the campaign than she was last time around. But I think now Carlson has about a 10% chance. The field has also been winnowed down and expanded in terms of who Trump might pick. In terms of the short list, surprisingly, Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, neither are on the short list, which is a shame if you're a supporter of Trump, because those two people would probably be the strongest vice presidential candidates, because they're both likable, they both come off as genial, they're both consensus builders, and they're both minorities. I think, and of course Haley is a woman, I think Scott would have been the best choice because I think black voters are really up for grabs. Of course, not the majority of them, but think Trump got twice as many black voters as Romney did. And he increased his black vote by about 6% from 2020 to 2016. So let's say you only get 12% of the black vote now. Well, what if the next election you could get 20% and someone like Tim Scott adds another 5%? Then you have 25% of the black vote. Then that means you could win a lot of those important swing states. So I would not, ironically, in the GOP, even though everybody's been saying the black vote is a lost cause, I would not say the black vote is a lost cause in any single way, shape, or form and are worth going after. Some other people on the list, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she'd be simply a god-awful choice, but she is on the short list. Obviously, there's a friendship of Trump and Mike Huckabee. Sanders was Trump's press secretary for quite some time, so there's certainly some real loyalty there. But I don't think she has charisma. She's certainly not likable. And I don't think looks should matter, but I think you want someone who is physically attractive, whether that's a man or a woman, especially because Trump is not that physically attractive. You want somebody physically attractive or pleasant enough to balance you out, and she's just remarkably unattractive. I hate to say it, but I know Trump is looking at that too, because Trump is all about looks as well. So I think she probably wouldn't be chosen, but she is certainly on the list. The opposite of a woman who's unattractive, Kristi Noem, who is quite attractive, obviously. She might be too attractive, where she turns some people off. But Kristi Noem, I think, is still Trump's most likely pick for vice president. I'd be surprised if anybody else is chosen. I think at this point she has about a 60% chance of being chosen, and she'd be a great choice. She's sufficiently conservative to lock up the base. She made a name for herself when she was governor of South Dakota for really not locking anything down. She even had less harsher lockdowns than Florida and Arkansas and Alabama and some of the states that really were oppositional to the over-control over COVID. So she's very competent. She's a great communicator. She has some dynamism. She doesn't seem terribly nice or likable in the way that Haley would or Tim Scott would be, but I think she'd be an excellent choice. Somebody still on the list, which would also be a smart choice, Byron Donalds. Byron Donalds is a black, youngest congressman out in Florida, elected, I think, only about 4 years ago, went out on a limb, supported Trump very early. He has a beautiful family. He's a dynamic figure, charismatic, and he has some bravado, and I think this is not relevant when I look at this race, but I think Trump likes a black man that fits the stereotypical, it might not necessarily be true, but stereotypical, strong, authoritarian black man image. And Byron Donalds is brolic. The guy's built. And comes off as that kind of very strong authoritarian black man. I think Trump really likes that. He just comes off as strong and self-assured and plays in that image because he wants it. The tough Trump guy image has worked well with some young black voters, personality-wise. So Byron Donalds, I think Byron Donalds would actually win the election for Trump. I think Kristi Noem would win the election for Trump as well. I think the others would not. And I think Tim Scott and Nikki Haley would win the election for Trump. And for people saying the vice presidential choice doesn't matter, I would say think again. I think the reason that Trump won last time is because he chose Mike Pence to lock up the conservative evangelicals within the Republican Party. And I don't think Trump would have won if it weren't for Mike Pence. On that same side of the coin, Hillary Clinton chose Tim Kaine, who was unremarkable, boring, and didn't add anything to her ticket. Versus if he chose Cory Booker, who was kind of very charismatic and dynamic, would some people think, well, I don't like Hillary, but Booker seems like an interesting guy. She might have won. So I think the vice presidential selection really makes all the difference in the world. Some other people being floated. Two terrible choices that Trump might choose is Marjorie Taylor Greene and Carrie Lake. And I said this before, but I think knowing Trump's psychology, I think he actually probably wants to sleep with his running mate if that's possible. I don't think Kristi Noem would allow that to happen. I think Carrie Lake and Marjorie Taylor Greene certainly would. But both of them come off as crazy, radical, and fringe candidates. Lake obviously has lost. She's running for Senate again, but who knows if she'll win? She's running against Kyrsten Sinema and Ruben Gallego in 2024. So who knows if she's doing badly in the polls or she doesn't make the nomination, then she might be able to get rescued. Carrie Lake is a great communicator, but again, it's a likability stuff. I think Carrie Lake just comes off as a very mean person. And she is kind of mean with the whole John McCain thing, saying you could leave right now. That she was giving a speech, and she said, if anybody supports John McCain, you could just leave right now. I think that's disrespectful to, he might be he might have been a corporate Republican, establishment Republican, but he served this nation, and to just trash him like that, she just comes off as very mean. Another name that's being floated, apparently he has little interest because he wants to continue serving in the Senate, but that would be J.D. Vance. I think actually J.D. Vance would be a very good choice because he is conservative, but he hasn't made any inflammatory, radical, extreme statements. And again, the likability factor matters. He comes off as smart, he comes off as capable, he comes off as likable. It just comes off as a nice, genial guy. And I've heard some stuff on the ground that he's actually a pretty good senator. I was out in East Palestine. And I still have some more footage to put up from that, kind of doing a follow-up. And what a lot of the residents told me is that J.D. Vance was the only statewide elected official, or even if you look at Congress or any of the lower positions, he's one of the very few officials that would constantly follow up with East Palestine, constantly actually report the true problems, openly speak against the Ohio EPA. So he's great at constituent services. Constituent services matter. We rarely focus on that, is how on the ground are you. But if you look at J.D. Vance's history of delivering for Ohio, he's done a pretty good job. Obviously, Ohio might not agree with him on a number of stuff. They just supported enshrining abortion rights in the Constitution as well as the legalization of marijuana. But Vance has been relatively quiet on the social issues as well, which I think is a smart move, and I think he could play more effectively to the middle than a lot of other people could. So that's kind of the very quick report on everything that's happening in the vice presidential race. Thank you guys again for following me. Please subscribe. Please don't unsubscribe. I've lost a number of subscribers randomly. Just might be a glitch in the system, but try to remain subscribed. That would be nice. And thank you guys for following me. We'll have some more East Palestine footage up next, as well as I'm preparing to take a trip up to New Hampshire to cover the big primary in person. So hope you guys stick around for that. Thanks a lot. Take care.